Let's continue our discussion with Iranian-born human rights activist Goldie Ghamari and former IDF Special Operations Commander Doron Kempel. Doron, I'd like to start with you. The president says that they have been degraded. We've sunk their navy, and that we've made tremendous strides militarily, but the strait is still closed. What do you think we should anticipate to come out of these discussions today in Islamabad?
Thank you, Tom. First of all, we should not expect that anything will be concluded in one day.
Right.
Secondly, if we take a step back, there was a tactical aim for this war. It has been achieved, and that is eradicating the Iranian military and postponing the cancer that Iran is by about 5 years, but knowing that they will reconstitute with the help of China, Russia, and the oil that they have. The major goal, or the strategic goal, was possibly regime change. It appears that President Trump, having accomplished the tactical goal, is giving negotiations a chance. And U.S. does have the leverage. So tactically, in the short term, the Straits of Hormuz are closed. But remember, the U.S. military is still there. And if the Iranians do not achieve the deal that the president wants, then there will be ground forces. The Straits of Hormuz will be conquered. They will be opened. And then the regime itself will be eradicated, and there will be a regime change. So this is an opportunity for the Iranians to reach a deal with the United States. The U.S. has the cards, assuming that the Iranian regime wants to survive and thinks beyond these 2 weeks that can end up just being a timeout, Tom.
I want to bring in now former Brigadier General in the United States Army and former Assistant Secretary of State for Military and Political Affairs, Mark Kimmett. He's joining us. General, you have stated that Iran seems to have sort of successfully diverted the U.S. from some of its original war goals. Talk to us about why you believe that is, and what you expect to happen coming out of Islamabad.
Well, first of all, it's important to understand two things. Number one, neither regime change nor opening the Strait of Hormuz were the United States' objectives in this war. The objectives in this war were to end the nuclear program of Iran, to end the ballistic missile program of Iran, and to end the regional proxies that have been so disastrous in the region. Unfortunately, because the Iranians were able to divert us from those objectives to a total focus now on the Strait of Hormuz, I don't believe we're negotiating for the right thing. And I also don't believe we're going to put ground troops inside of Iran to take the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah, well, we certainly don't have near the number of forces capable of doing that, though. Just a quick follow-up to you, General. Why can't, if the president says they've sunk their navy, I think a lot of people are asking the question, well, why can't we, with our naval forces, open it and then build a coalition to maintain safe passage for the ships there?
Well, two things. I think the major worry is the drone and missile capability, along with the speedboat capability, the armed speedboats that the Iranians have. As we remember, in Yemen, the USS Cole was knocked out by a speedboat loaded with explosives. So I don't think that the United States, because it's a belligerent in this war, can open the Strait of Hormuz without significant military activity. I've always advocated, and I've written about this, bringing in the allies to do this. The allies are non-belligerents. If they do this, then Iran has to make a decision about whether they want to bring Europe and China into the war.
Yeah. Goldie, I want to bring you into this. You and your family left Iran at the start of the Islamic Revolution back in 1979. President Trump this week, he chose to give the Iranians an off-ramp. But as we've been discussing, the strait is not open. Iran is now blackmailing the world with oil blackmail. Do you agree with the president's attempt here to come to some sort of an agreement, or do you agree with the general that that we've sort of now kind of the Iranians have sort of refocused our attention away from what the original objectives were?
I think there's more here that's going on behind the scenes. There's more at play. This is the least, ceasefire I've ever seen. The negotiations don't seem to be going well. Just right now, I saw on X Islamic regime is saying one thing, and then the United States is coming out and denying that that happened. So it doesn't seem like negotiations are going well. I think there's something else going on. What I can tell you is that right now, the IRGC has turned into at least four different factions, and each faction is going after one another. Right now, there are IRGC supporters inside of occupied Iran who are calling for the head of Araghchi and Ghalibaf because they're angry at these negotiations. So I think there's something else at play. I think President Trump is using these negotiations to further weaken the Islamic regime. And I agree with the general. The United States goal should not be regime change. Regime change is something that the Iranian people themselves will accomplish. However, what the United States and Israel have done and are continuing to do is to level the playing field. President Trump has made it clear the only deal that he is interested in is unconditional surrender. And so we hope that President Trump will continue down this road, either unconditional surrender or total obliteration of the IRGC.
Doron, back to you. Israel has reportedly begun talks with Lebanon, combating Hezbollah, an incredibly important objective along with the other proxies of Iran that have very, very wide tentacles. What do you see happening next with respect to those negotiations? What are your sources telling you?
So we need to remember that Hezbollah is an arm of the IRGC, and if our goal, the mutual goal of the U.S. and Israel, is to limit the ability of Iran to project power, the Hezbollah needs to be either negotiated with or decimated in some degree. The big picture, though, is that the Prime Minister of Israel will do what the President of the U.S. says. So long as there are moves on the ground and there's fighting in Lebanon, that means that President Trump has authorized that.
General, a wild week. Swings in messaging and tone. We had the post on Easter Sunday, the threat to end the civilization. Now you have this tenuous deal. If you were advising the president, what would you tell him to do next, assuming that Doron is correct and that these conversations in Islamabad really aren't going to necessarily yield a lot of fruit? Because this has been, from a military standpoint, by many accounts, a very successful operation thus far. But what do you say to the president if you were sitting next to him about what the next step is here?
Well, first of all, the military objectives have been accomplished. It's been a brilliant military campaign, but those military campaign goals have not translated into the achievement of the strategic goals. I think what I would advise the president is recognize that the Iranians typically deny, they deflect, they delay. These are just the start of negotiations, and nothing will be accomplished. Don't expect anything to be accomplished in Islamabad. But don't take that delay tactic as a reason to restart the war. That's just the way that the Iranians negotiate. We're going to get much better results out of them if we take the long view on this rather than the short view. But at the same time, we've got to continue to prepare and to restock to continue the war, because I don't want to do the standard Israeli tactic, which is mowing the grass. Don't achieve your objectives, withdraw from the area of operations, and then a couple of years ago, you've got to go back in and do it again. This must be, since we've made the decision to go in, we ought to go in big. As Napoleon said, when told to take Vienna, take Vienna.
Yeah, put your bombs where your mouth is. That's what you need to do and actually finish the job. Goldie, back over to you. President Trump says that we kind of have regime change already, since we are now dealing with a new crop of people. Back to your previous point, first, do you agree with him? And are you seeing any semblance of sort of an organized opposition at this point, given some of the fissures that we're seeing within the IRGC that you mentioned earlier?
I think it's really important to take President Trump seriously, but not literally. When President Trump has in the past previously said regime change, he says, what I mean is that there's a change within the regime because there's new people that we're speaking with. However, the people that are currently controlling the IRGC, they're all the exact same people. So there really hasn't been real regime change. But President Trump did say in one of his Truth Social posts that he hopes that now with this new regime change, something revolutionarily wonderful might happen. Who knows? And there is, in fact, an organized, controlled opposition. It's the Crown Prince of Iran, His Royal Highness Reza Pahlavi, who is leading Iran's Lion and Sun revolution. The vast majority of Iranians support him, both inside and outside of the country. And there's a reason that the Islamic regime has shut down the internet and cut off the voices of 90 million Iranians from the outside world since the beginning of this war, because they don't want the world to know that Iranians support the Crown Prince of Iran to lead the country from an Islamic dictatorship to a secular democratic society. So we do have opposition, official opposition. It's just not anything to do with the regime. Ultimately, what Iranians are saying is we want total regime collapse. Like, we want them eradicated. We want them, erased from the face of the earth. They are a cancer. And if you leave even one cancer cell left behind, it will multiply again. So it needs to be eradicated. Let the Iranian people decide their future. And we've already made that choice.
And that is the big question: how exactly to do that? We will be watching the developments in Islamabad very, very closely, and I'd love to have the three of you back. Goldie Ghamari, General Mark Kimmett, always good to see you, sir. Doron Kempel, thank you so much.
Information. Truth is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real news for real people.